my name is Mark Bellabo. I'm the Communications Director of the Natural Gas Group. Mark Weiss is the Executive Director of the Natural Gas Group. Annie Daigle, who's sitting here, is a hydrogeologist, so she's got water expertise and also in geology. Craig Parks, to my very far left, is a petroleum geologist that works with the Department of Natural Resources. David White, here to my immediate left, is a policy analyst with the Department of Environment and knows a lot of technical issues related to the discussion document. Dr. Lapierre, I'd like to introduce you to as a Professor Emeritus in Biology at the University of Moncton since October 2003. At the same university, he was holder of the Casey Irving Chair in Sustainable Development from 1993 to 2001. A Professor of Wildlife and Environmental Ecology from 1970 to 99. And Director of the Masters in Environmental Studies program from 94 to 99. Between 90 and 94, he was also Director of the University's Environmental Science Research Center. So Dr. Lapierre, if you'd like to say a few words.
Say thank you all for coming. You seem to be a large group here this evening, so I'm quite interested in seeing what you have to say and listening. So my comments will be no longer than that. And once again, I do want to thank you for the time and effort that all those who have brought forward information to me.
The document itself is divided into 12 main sections, which contain 116 recommendations. And the next subject titles here that I'll be stepping through go through 1 through 12 of those main titles or key principles. So in terms of geophysical or seismic testing, this section of the document addresses seismic testing, which is actually a pretty common technique used by the oil and natural gas industry, as well as frac fluid additives and chemical use in fracturing operations, public disclosure of that information. Additionally, there's a note in the recommendation within the document for notification radiuses for things like seismic activities or drilling operations to have notification radiuses put in place. And Section 12 is all about maintaining an effective regulatory framework. This section is aimed at ensuring that we have a continuously improving set of rules for this industry. Recommendations would include that the EIA regulation or the Environmental Impact Assessment regulation would continue to be used as a regulatory tool. We also recommend that we continue to gather additional scientific information. As many as these reports are completed and continue to come out, we want to have the flexibility to continue to improve whatever regulations we were to put in place.
Due to the fact that 90% of the Quispamsis residents rely on private wells for the potable drinking water supply, the Quispamsis Town Council hereby calls for a moratorium to be placed on hydraulic fracturing for the exploration and the production of shale gas within the municipal boundaries of Quispamsis until such time. Until such time, the town can be convinced that it can be done safely and properly, and the motion was carried unanimously.
All the way through that document and through the regulations, I continue to see the word should. Should means that you can or you can't. You don't have to, you don't want to, you should, but you don't have to. And that's the same with the government or the industry. They're saying the same thing. I suggest that all the shoulds be changed to must.
It's written as recommendations to government, and since we're not government, we make recommendations. So we basically say government should do this, or we feel government should do that. So that's the reason for the wording.
I want to talk tonight about democracy and the democratic process, and ask you to go back and ask the government why they felt it necessary to make sure that cities weren't invited. And I don't know what other people in the room think. But you know, we're all New Brunswickers, and we all should have a say in what's going to happen to the future of our province, because this is long-term stuff. This isn't stuff that you just say, oh, let's do that today and we'll see what happens. I'm proposing at the very least that we request a 5-year moratorium on any further shale gas development and see what else is happening around the world. North Carolina voted yesterday to say no to shale gas development. And these just like us, these places don't do such things lightly. I want to talk about in making sure that cities weren't heard. You in fact removed the bulk of the people from the province from having an opportunity to come to these. Many city dwellers, just by living in urban environments, in fact don't have cars, and I defy you to get from St. John to the Norton Legion without a car. It's not possible. And as well, you know, when we don't have an open process that's fair and open to the public, what that does is it shuts us all down, because I don't hear what you're saying, and I don't know what your concerns are, and you don't hear what my concerns are, so we never get to really know the full picture. So I'm going to give you an example, because this government said that it would only be rural people that would be impacted. Well, I'm going to tell you what happened to me in St. John in terms of the potash core. Nobody told me 8 or 9 years ago when I moved close to Crown Street on King Street East that the potash core was going to hit an underwater ocean, and that was going to result in the times of over 200 trucks a day, those double tanker trucks, barreling through our residential neighborhood 24/7. After working with Potash Corps, they have reduced the trucks and they run from 6 to 6, 7 days a week. But when you're all talking about how nice it was Canada Day and being outside, I have a lovely backyard at my house in the South End. You would never go outside to my garden anymore, because every 7 to 10 minutes, one of these double tanker trucks comes along, beating the street to death and keeping us all away from enjoying our property. So I think that this whole thought that rural or that urban people didn't have to be consulted, I think is a blight on this government, and they should be ashamed of themselves for calling this a public consultation. Thank you.
I'm John Whitmore. I'm from Hillsborough, where fracking is going on as we speak. There's oil fracking going on in the fields in Stony Creek, and there's fracking going on within the village limits. This is not a problem to anybody, because we're selling municipal water to the company because they've hired our local fire chief. So is there a conflict of interest? I don't know, but I say it. Anyway, I have two questions. One deals with what happens when there is an incident, because I don't think there's any geologist or person who's got any knowledge of this will say you can't have an incident. And I'm interested particularly in the people who end up with a well which is contaminated. Do they have to spend $50,000 hiring legal help to prove that it was in some way related to the oil company, the company that's doing the drilling? Or is it just a case that we can't afford to sue, so we don't get anything? Because I've been through an incident like that in a different context, where the person at fault said, hey, you can't afford to sue me. And there it was, done. So I need that question answered. Who pays when there's an incident? Is it the provincial government? Do we as taxpayers pay for the troubles caused by the oil shale, the gas people? Or does the company have some stake in that? The second question...
You want to answer one of the first names?
Yeah.
Please stand. Okay, sorry. I have to hold the mic up like this. It's Dave White here. Yeah, when we were reviewing other jurisdictions, it was identified as a big problem that, you know, obviously industry has a lot more deeper pockets than the private sector, private people. So there were various recommendations made in other jurisdictions, and we looked at one of them in particular, which basically says it's essentially a no-fault system where if there were an impact seen to a water well based on the pre-water well sampling in the post, then industry would be responsible. There would be no requirement for a court case or consultants or anything. It would be based on the change in water quality within a certain distance of an activity over a certain time. So that recommendation is in the document. If you feel it needs some work, we'd really like to hear from you, but that has been considered.
Okay, I guess the detail in that is the setback the 250 meters, or, because I know the fracking can run over 1 kilometer out sideways and then fan upwards and outwards from there. So you could be 1.5 kilometers away, depending on the nature of the rock. And yeah, I know there's qualifications. But does it specifically say 250 meters or within the range of the fracking?
Yeah, there is a specific setback in the document. Yeah, the baseline testing, the water wells would have to be tested within 500 meters of the drilling. And the water supply replacement protocol is what we're calling, would kick in if there were changes to the water quality in the well. Now, the trick is, what has to be done in order to make this happen is the water well quality has to be measured before any activity has taken place.
With chemicals?
Yeah, we call it a baseline test. Yeah, it would be tested for the protocol we've arranged, or the draft form has about 30 different parameters, and they're targeted at the main indicators that would show both for the oil and gas that's produced, as well as the fracking fluid, as well as something called produced water, which is water that's naturally in the ground and comes out with the well. So the range of parameters that they'd be required to test for would be indicators of those impacts.
Does that include the depreciation of your
One
property
second.
too?
We can have questions coming from the floor, sir. I'm really sorry about that, but
Join the line.
we'll go back to this gentleman.
Okay.
That's fine. Go ahead, sir.
The second question. I have an MLA who is on record as saying he doesn't really believe people who know anything are safe. That the only people who really know stuff are people who live back on a scratch farm somewhere, because they really know stuff. So my second question is, it's all very well to say we have civil servants who will do the job of keeping track of the problems that arise, keeping track of the numbers, doing this, that, the other thing. But what guarantee do we have that this government that wants to cut everything in sight will keep on hiring these very civil servants that we need?
That's more of a rhetorical question. Continue.
Okay, but that's my question. We need some guarantees that the people who understand what is going on at the field level will continue to be available.
Okay, absolutely. And that's been noted. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your concise comments. Ma'am.
My name is Ruth Wolpen, and I live in this area. I want to talk about cancer. In a study conducted in 2010 in Texas by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it was found that 6 counties in the Barnett Shale with the most productive natural gas equipment included the highest count of compressors, separators, tanks, and other above-ground points for emissions, also have high breast cancer rates. The increase is notable as the breast cancer rates in other parts of Texas are in decline. And I quote from the article, according to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's 2010 inventory of gas production equipment in 24 counties of Barnett Shale, the same 6 counties with rising rates of invasive breast cancer also have the highest count of compressors, separators, tanks, and other above-ground points of emission. Benzene is a chemical used in slickwater hydraulic fracturing. The International Agency for Research on Cancer and the National Toxicology Program have labeled benzene as a definite human carcinogen. Multiple studies point to a correlation between benzene exposure and breast cancer. I am a breast cancer survivor. When I was diagnosed, my children were 10, 8, and 17 months. At the time, I didn't know whether I would live long enough to see them grow up. It was a very frightening experience, and I certainly wouldn't wish that for anybody. Fortunately, I'm still here, and my children are now adults. My youngest son, who is 23, owns a country market and grows produce for 400 families without the use of chemicals and pesticides. Between the two businesses, he employs 70 people. He does all of this without grants, forgivable loans, and other cash incentives that governments hand out to attract industry. And yes, his land is leased for oil and gas exploration, which was done without his knowledge or consent. The Cannabicasis Valley is a fertile farming area. There is opportunity for sustainable agriculture. With climate change, as other areas lose arable land, the ability to produce food becomes more valuable. Our province's warming climate increases our potential as we now have a longer growing season. As many areas in the U.S. have contaminated their soil and water, leaving behind thousands of toxic waste post-fracking sites, clean soil and pure aquifers are becoming ever more valuable. We have a choice. I'm asking each panel member to comment, please. And please look me right in the eye, because I'm going to ask you whether you feel that cancer is an acceptable risk in order to develop shale gas. And I might add that in Penobscot, there are a lot of men with prostate cancer. So this is not something that is just affecting women. Should the government have the vision, wisdom, and intelligence to encourage sustainable use of land that will produce a future for our children and grandchildren? When you answer, please keep in mind that cancer doesn't just affect the patient, but the whole family, and that treating cancer is much more expensive than prevention. So I would ask each of you in turn to please comment.
I'll tell you what. I thank you very much for that question. Ma'am, we're government workers, and we're here to provide technical support to Dr. LaPierre. We're not the topic of discussion, and I understand your point. I understand. Nobody here.
Answer the question!
I think
ask,
each person
please.
can answer either yes, they think it's an acceptable risk, or no, it isn't.
Ma'am, there's nobody here that advocates cancer.
There are 4 people here on the panel.
And bring someone to answer the
You're not
question.
machines, you're people!
I would like
Each
to,
one of these people can have cancer.
ma'am, we absolutely understand exactly what you're saying, and we have made no.
No, you don't!
Answer the question.
I would ask, please, that there be no yelling or screaming. We understand this person's comments 100%, and I'd ask you to continue, please.
Your refusal to answer is an answer in itself.
The rest of my talk is waiting for an answer to my question. Annie, could you please look me right in the eye? Would you accept cancer as an acceptable risk for this industry?
I'll tell you what, we're
Can
going to
I
ask
say
you.
something? You've asked me a question, so
Yes.
I've been asking to respond. I'm not going to
Yes.
speak for anyone else on the panel. My mother's a cancer survivor, and we went through that similar trauma. It was completely unexpected, although she's a little older. And she did recover, as you, and I applaud you for that. And it's not the same as me having cancer, of course. Now, you're asking if increased cancer risk is an acceptable result of shale gas exploration.
Yes.
I don't think it is myself, but what I think is not necessarily the issue here. You've asked me a personal question. I'm answering you from my personal perspective. If that's helpful to you,
It's honest.
you have my answer. So.
Thank you. But please don't consider us as so much collateral damage. We do not want this industry in this province.
Sir, You have the microphone, sir.
I think I'll just read the letter my wife gave me just a short while by phone. Addressed to the panel.
Could you identify yourself, please?
William Brewer.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Most of us have children or great-grandchildren that are also relying on clean water for drinking and cooking. If you oil companies think it is all right to pollute the water you drink, do you want your children or grandchildren to get sick and maybe die from contaminated water or food poisoned by the same water? That's a question to the panel. Gotta have an answer.
Again, this goes to the exact same thing.
Not necessarily pollute the water.
Okay, I'll answer that question. You're asking me if I want my children to die, what do you expect I'm going to say? Seriously. First of all, I don't have children, I have to confess that. But if I did, I certainly wouldn't want them to die.
You have nieces and
That's the
nephews?
question. Pardon me?
You have nieces and nephews?
I do. I have
Okay,
four.
would you want them to die?
If I said yes, I'd be in big trouble. So of course not.
All right, I'll finish her statement. I sure wouldn't want that guilt on my shoulders. Please stop the fracking before it's too late. Now, I'll be very short on this. This is from Kim Burgess, who spoke at UNB. One of the smartest women I know. I'm going to give this to Mr. Parrott. These are some of the comments she made about water. And it's interesting to note her husband is a fracking expert. So I had some good questions for her. Here's how she responded. In the coming years, Canada is going to produce more food than any place else in the world because we have the availability to grow food and the water to grow it. The future demands for water will outstrip our current capacity to provide it. We must protect the water we have and do not put our clean water in jeopardy. When she made that statement, I said, what would your husband do? Would he frack through an aquifer or groundwater? She said, absolutely no. I have a question for the panel. You know Tom Al at UNB, who's a senior hydrologist?
Yes.
Okay, well, Tom and I had some interesting comments. Tom told me that this slick water, they told the city of Fredericton that 60 to 70% of it stays in the ground. But what comes up, he doesn't know how they can dilute it. There's nothing on record. There's nothing that's been investigated through UNB, through the labs, how to dilute this. Now, I've just been told that it's shipped to Nova Scotia and then goes into the Bay of Fundy. What happens to it in Nova Scotia to dilute it? Can you tell us?
You have a panelist here.
Yeah. I wanted to answer another one.
You want to tell us?
That first one.
Like if the slick water goes to Nova Scotia, it's transported here to Nova Scotia?
That's correct.
Oh, yes,
How is it
sorry.
broken down before it's put into the Bay of Fundy?
Your first, though, I wanted to respond to something with fracking in aquifers. Of course not. No one in their right mind would frack in an aquifer. When aquifer is... Well, no, let me explain. And pardon me if I'm saying the wrong thing here, but basically, the idea is to protect the upper approximately 300-meter depth, and Andy can correct me if I'm wrong, which is potable water. Aquifer is where you draw potable water from, essentially. And that's the critical area. And in our recommendations, we're talking about triple casing through the aquifer. You might remember something called Pavilion, Wyoming, where there's been some implication of fracking fluid getting into well water. What they did in that case, from my reading of the scientific documents, they actually did frack in the aquifer. They fracked at a depth shallower than the nearest water well, which in my mind is completely unacceptable. I can't explain, why they did that, but it's not surprising to me that they had some issues with that.
My question is, what do they do with the water to break it down before it enters the Bay of Fundy?
Yeah, I'll get to your question. There's a number of ways they can treat fracking wastewater.
Really?
Yes, there are, because they, sorry, do you want to talk, Yanni? Okay, sorry, I've been co-opted here.
Sorry. Just in terms of Dr. Tom Al, I also know Dr. Tom Al, we've had some discussions, and I would recommend anyone to read the piece, the position paper that UNB did put out with Dr. Tom Al, Dr. Kieran McQuarrie, Dr. Carl Butler, and I can't remember the fourth one. In that, they do talk about the different treatment options, so he does not believe that it's not treatable. His comments were about the salt, so taking salt out of the water, because the water that comes up is very salty. So it's about treating that, and it is possible. There are technologies that can bring it to potable water, but they're very expensive. And the technologies are constantly improving. So it is possible to treat this water to drinking water standards, although it's not necessary to do so in many cases. It can be treated just to the level that's required to be recycled.
Thank you very much. Is she talking on my time or her time?
I paused your time. So you got 2 minutes and 25
Oh,
seconds.
good. 2 minutes. Well, good. I can say a lot in 2 minutes.
There you go.
First, I'm going to tell the public here that on March the 23rd, 2012, the Catholic Church Registry Rome has taken a stand and declared water a human right. Okay? And last but not least, I'd like to congratulate Dr. LePere here on his receiving the Order of Canada for his environmental work. There's a great responsibility going to wear that order around your neck, Doctor. I was decorated for the work I done in environment back several years ago, and it's a tremendous responsibility. And I hope that you consider all the hearts of the people here tonight. They don't want fracking, and I don't want it either.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Can I ask you to move the microphone up so people will hear you? Just keep going. Oh, just got yourself a free microphone.
Well, I don't know. Here,
There you go. Thank you very much.
is that better? Okay. My name's Carol Ring, and I'm from Rothsay, and I'm a member of Hampton Water First, working against fracking, and also I'm a member of the Council of Canadians. And my concern is about property values. I'm going to read, I have a lot of documents that I've researched about property values when fracking occurs, and I want to read some of the information to you first before I ask my question. I have to take my glasses off to read small print. Gas companies covet the shale gas deposits lying under homes and farms. Now this is in New York, but it would be here as well, of course. In New York's Marcellus Shale region, and are pursuing leasing agreements with area property owners. Many homeowners and farmers in need of cash are inclined to say yes. In making their argument, gas companies reassure property owners that the drilling processes and chemicals used are safe. Yet, aside from arguments about the relative safety of the extraction process, are issues not often discussed, such as the owner's potential liability and the continued viability of the mortgage. The property owner can be particularly vulnerable. When the drilling process involves high-volume horizontal hydraulic fracturing or fracking, for example, when Ellen Harrison signed a gas lease agreement in 2008, the company representative made no mention of fracking. Harrison received no details, only a chance for a win-win with clean gas for the locals and royalties for her. Like most Americans, Harrison has a mortgage loan secured by her home. All mortgages, Harrison's included, prohibit hazardous activity and hazardous substances on the property. And one other part of this says about American culture. Well, that would apply to Canadian culture as well. Traditionally favors land use that keeps heavy industrial activity out of residential neighborhoods. The reasons range from safety to aesthetics. A home represents the family's most valuable asset, financially and otherwise. In legal terms, home ownership, or fee simple absolute title, means a bundle of rights encompassing the airspace above, the ground below their land surface. It entitles homeowners to build up and out, pledge the house and land as collateral for mortgage loan, and lease or sell the property. Part of a homeowner's purchase price pays for this bundle of rights. Another bundle of rights attributable to home ownership consists of the actual roof over one's head, clean running water, and access to utilities. A third bundle of rights is attributable to the intangibles that make a house a home. such as peaceful sanctuary, fresh air, and a safe, secure haven for their children. Residential fracking challenges all of these attributes of home ownership. So that's one of them. Now this one is, that, by the way, that one was from the New York State Bar Association Journal.
We'd ask you to leave those documents with us, if you could, or give us copies.
Okay. This one is from the Altoona Mirror, and it's written by Wendy Zook, who's a columnist at the Altoona Mirror. Okay. Part of what she says here is, what's the landowner's, oh, this is a man who had fracking problems. What's the landowner's rights, Wayne asked. We're just a number on a piece of paper. How can you sell property that's got contaminated water and contaminated ground?
Here, here.
A similar story in Texas. Tim and Christine Ruggiero, who live in a suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth, watched as their 10-acre property lost more than 70% of its value, falling from $257,330 to $75,240 this year. The reduction was directly linked to the use of their land for drilling of Barnett Shale, similar to the Marcellus Shale, thought to lie beneath the rolling hills of Bedford County. The Ruggerios purchased their home in 2004 and watched a gas and oil company set up wells 300 feet from their back door in September 2009. 1 year later, the $250,000 property that they put $50,000 worth of work into has been appraised at $75,000.
And if you could just, I don't want to rush you, but we've got about 30, 40 seconds now.
Oh. Well, okay then. So,
very important points.
They certainly are important points, and that's 300 feet from their back door, and you people are saying 250? Meters. Oh, okay. Yeah, but still, how is that going to protect a homeowner from the pollution that the shale gas industry has? There's air pollution. That's not just going to stay over the leased areas. That pollution is going to go everywhere, as is evidenced as what happened in Wyoming. So there's no way that this industry can do this safely, and there's no way that the government of New Brunswick can assure homeowners that their property values are not going to decrease when fracking occurs in this province. And I should say if fracking occurs in this province, because we're going to try and stop it if we can. So the other thing too that I just want to point out about this is when property values decrease, the revenue that the province gets from the property, which are taxes, are going to decrease as well. So that offsets whatever financial benefit that they would get from it. The other thing that offsets it is the increase in health costs, because the people who live in these properties, if they continue to live there, are going to get sick. Most of them just have to walk away and leave their homes. They have to forget about what they owe on the mortgages, because they can't sell their house, they can't live in their house, and they have to leave. So if they want to stay healthy.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate it.
So my one question is that better? My one question is, why are property values only covered by a $100,000 bond if the water or land is contaminated by shale gas development? Is this all a homeowner would get if their property does become worthless?
So Dave will answer that question. Dave?
Okay, just one point I'd like to make, and I'm aware of the studies you've mentioned and what has happened. I'd just like to clarify that those were properties that hosted a well pad. In other words, they signed a lease with a gas company, and that is not something that anyone in this room is obligated to do. I mean, it's your choice to.
But if your neighbor does it,
well, that's a good point.
Then you're going to get polluted.
I know, and that's a valid point
Of
in
course.
terms of the setbacks that we're looking at as well. So, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your original question now.
Well, it was $100,000. Is that all? What about the homeowners 2 or 3 homes down? If their land is polluted, their water is polluted, their air is polluted, what are they going to get? And they can't sell their house. What are they going to get? Nothing.
Right, yeah.
They're going to get nothing.
Yeah, I guess if you do read the discussion document, there's a variety of financial securities that are in there. I just encourage you to have a look, and if you...
I did.
Okay, good for you. Yeah, well, okay, well...
That's true.
That's good.
I really have to go to somebody else now.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one suggestion. Have you watched a little video called Heavy Traffic? If you haven't, please watch it.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Traffic. F-R-A-F-F-I-C. Heavy Traffic.
Hi, my name is Jim Imberger, and I'm from Taymout, and I'm here because I wasn't able to attend any meetings elsewhere in the province. Our community association will make a full and detailed response to all these recommendations in a private meeting that we've asked for with Dr. LaPierre and the council. We're just waiting for that date. But in the meantime, I would like to make just a couple general comments and one question. I hadn't planned on making comments. I was just going to ask my question, but these are in response to things that came up tonight. Just real quickly in the presentation, I have to say this is perhaps a historic moment. I was very happy to hear for the first time in a year and a half from a member of the government, the industry, or the media that shale gas industry is not just like the rest of the oil industry. So thank you very much for saying that. Secondly, it was also brought up that an admission that the royalty scheme that this industry is very heavily front-loaded with investment, so their costs are very much upfront. What was not mentioned was that the production of this industry is also very much upfront. So for those first 3 years, when they're recouping all their costs, is also when they're pumping up to 85% of the gas that these wells will ever produce. So when we start collecting royalties, it's going to be on that 5-6% year after year that we get it. The third response was about the $1 million being the big hammer that we have to pound people with. And I would just like to point out, off the top of my head, I remember exactly, but it's Chesapeake and also Cabot, I believe, in Pennsylvania, have been fined, and there may be more than these are just 3 that I know about, $1.4 million, $1.6 million, and $4 million in various fines against them. And Pennsylvania, if you go online and look at their rate of infractions, is just as bad today as it was 3 years ago.
Right.
Finally, before I ask my question about the setback of the air pollution, Carol mixed up feet and meters, but it doesn't make any difference. The 250-meter setback seems a little outdated now since the first and only long-term health report from the University of Colorado came out a couple weeks ago. And the main conclusion of the report was that it was based on air pollution, not water, but on the air pollution, that anyone within a half mile of a producing well has a 66% chance, increased chance of cancer or other diseases. So we're going to put that out there. My question, which I hope to get maybe an answer to tonight, sort of underlies all these detailed things. In fact, it underlies this whole process that we're going through here now. And I'm just surprised that the media or someone else hasn't asked this, so I'm going to ask it. Underlying any recommendations or regulations that come out, there has to be a statutory framework, to make that into law. We are told constantly by all members of the government that it's okay to go ahead and do all this exploration now, because if we find out that things aren't safe, down the road a couple of years, we'll just stop it. So now I look at what's happening in the province, and I'll give you a hypothetical question, but it's a real question, in terms of what could happen. So you have SWN, who has just been granted another 2 years to spend their $47 million on pretty flimsy grounds, I would add. But say they go ahead and they do everything they're supposed to do in our gas and regulations and spend all their $47 million, and they find a nice little patch of gas that they want to produce somewhere. In the meantime, as we've seen with virtually the entire medical establishment in New Brunswick and other places around the world, saying we should have a moratorium because this stuff isn't safe, we don't know enough about it to say whether it's safe or not, actually, So we get to this point where, SWN has done all their things, they've obeyed every law we put out there for them, spent their $47 million. The doctors say, no, it's not safe. Under what statutory or what act that you mentioned earlier can the Premier say to them, well, I'm sorry, SWN, but $47 million poorly spent, see you later. You know, I mean, it's a serious question, because if we can't do that, then all the stuff we're talking about now is just futile. You know?
I thank you for that question, and
I have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Sorry, would you like an answer?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, essentially, in order to drill a gas or oil well, as we speak right now, it has to go through an environmental impact assessment, which gives government the right to do a couple of things. One, they can not provide the certificate. In other words, they can refuse the project, essentially. That would have to be a cabinet decision, but that possibility does exist, that government could, in fact, say no thanks. Now, I'm not saying there wouldn't be political implications and financial implications, but the fact is, if you're talking regulation, they do have the right to say no.
Right. Well, and as you say,
the second question has to be asked in 22 seconds. Because you've eaten up.
Okay, I'll ask it twice. Okay, so then the question becomes, in this fantasy world that you're imagining, where we could actually tell them to go away without getting our pantsuit off or ending up as an international criminal, who would make that decision as to whether this is safe? Now, you're talking about a single well. We could look at this project and say, well, you're not doing good, concrete mixing on these ones. So I'm talking about the industry. We're talking about banning the industry or moratorium on the industry, not on a single well. So who's going to make this decision? If all the doctors in the province say it's a bad idea, if we get a lot of new environmental studies that are coming along that's saying that even with the best care, that you're going to have probably a pretty high percentage rate of failures. So if all those people say that it's bad, who's making the decision? Is it just the premier? Is it you guys? What's the process? Is the public going to have input to that process?
First of all, it's definitely not the people in this room who are making that kind of decision. That's a policy. I'm sorry, but that's true.
That's an honest answer.
Well, we know that. I'm asking what is the process?
Okay, let me talk about. You're asking me how government makes laws and makes policy decisions. I mean, basically, there's elected officials, and there's a cabinet, and they ask advice from various people, and they make their decisions. So if you're talking generalities, then that's the general answer. Specifically, again, you mentioned the industry as a whole. I can answer for a well as a whole. Basically, it's reviewed by a company called the Technical Review Committee, which are experts at the federal and provincial level. They provide advice to Environmental Assessment Department. They write a memo to the government, and they recommend, here's what you should do. But government is government, and they're elected, and we're not, so they make the decision. So
that's exactly it.
So to sum it up then, essentially, the government policy statement that, we can go ahead and just continue down this road because hypothetically we'll be able to stop in the future is pretty much simply just elaborate propaganda.
Well, that's a comment, and it's been duly noted, I'm sure, by our panel. Sir.
My name's Jim Walsh.
Hello?
Yes.
There you go.
My name's Jim Walsh. I'm from St. Martin's. And this kind of dovetails with the previous fellow here about Chesapeake. When Chesapeake has to file a prospectus to certain stakeholders, shareholders, investors, by law, they have to reveal any liabilities that may be incurred by that process. And this is the prospectus from February of this year, 2012. Natural gas and oil drilling and producing operations can be hazardous and may expose us to liabilities, including environmental liabilities. Natural gas and oil operations are subject to many risks, including well blowouts, cratering and explosions, pipe failures, fires, formations with abnormal pressures, uncontrollable flows of natural gas, oil, brine, well fluids, and other environmental hazards and risks. Our drilling operations involve risks with high pressures and mechanical difficulties, such as stuck pipes, collapsed casings, separated cables. Some of these risks or hazards could materially and adversely affect our revenues and expenses. Revenues and expenses, not your lives. By reducing or shutting in production from wells or otherwise negatively impacting the projected economic performance of our prospects. And if any of these risks occurs, we could sustain substantial losses as a result of injury or loss of life, severe damage to or destruction of property, natural resources, or equipment, pollution or other environmental damage, cleanup responsibilities, regulatory investigations, and administrative, civil, and criminal penalties. In other words, it's a cost of doing business if they don't follow the regulations. Instructions resulting in limited or suspension of operations. There is an inherent risk of incurring significant environmental costs and liabilities in our operations due to our use, generation, handling, and disposal of materials, including waste, petroleum, hydrocarbons, and other chemicals. We may incur joint and several strict liabilities under applicable environmental laws in connection with release of petroleum, hydrocarbons, and other hazardous services at or under from our lease or owned properties resulting from current or historical operations. In some cases, our properties have been used for natural gas and oil exploration and production activities for a number of years, often by third parties not under our control. We also could incur material fines, penalties, and government or third-party claims as a result of violations or liabilities under applicable environmental laws and regulations. For our non-operated properties, we are dependent on the operator for operational and regulatory compliance. In other words, there's contractors doing the work. While we maintain insurance against some, but not all, of the risks described above, our insurance may not be adequate to cover casualty losses or liabilities, and our insurance does not cover penalties or fines that may be assessed by government. Also, in the future, we may not be able to obtain insurance at premium levels that justify its purpose, which would be a perfect example of the duplicity of who Mr. Alwyn wants us to go to bed with the promise that they'll still love us in the morning.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. It's always a pleasure to put a face to a name to the emails we get. It's nice to meet you, sir.
Maureen Burke, Dr. Lapierre, and members of the Shale Gas Group, I would like to bring to your attention the New Brunswick Community Adult Learning Services Branch, Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor document dated December 2010 entitled Working Together for Adult Literacy, an Adult Literacy Strategy for New Brunswick Action Plan 2010 to 2013, which states on page 2 that, quote, "It is now widely recognized that improving adult literacy skills is of fundamental importance to the growth and prosperity of our province." The International Adult Literacy Skills Survey, the IALSS of 2003, showed that 50% of the population of New Brunswick between the ages of 16 and 65 have less than IALSS Level 3 skills. That is, the level deemed necessary to function in a modern industrialized economy and society. The vision is that New Brunswickers attain the literacy skills that they need to participate fully at home, at work, and in their communities. End of quote. The International Adult Literacy Skills Survey of 2003 used the following definition of literacy. Literacy is using printed and written information to function in society, to achieve one's goals, and to develop one's knowledge and potential. End of quote. The IALSS of 2003 tested more than 23,000 Canadians on their proficiency in 4 domains: prose literacy, document literacy, numeracy, and problem solving, and found that 56% of New Brunswick's adult population aged 16 and over scored at the lowest 2 levels, levels 1 and 2, in the prose domain. That 65.3% of New Brunswick's adult population aged 16 and over scored at the lowest 2 levels in the numeracy domain, and 58.3% scored in the lowest 2 levels in the document domain. Prose literacy refers to the knowledge and skills needed to understand and use information from texts, including...
Can I just interrupt for a second?
It won't be that long.
This is on shale gas?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
No, absolutely. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. Prose literacy refers to the knowledge and skills needed to understand and use information from texts, including editorials, news stories, brochures, and instruction manuals. Document literacy refers to the knowledge and skills required to locate and use information contained in various formats, including job applications, payroll forms, transportation schedules, maps, tables, and charts. Numeracy refers to the knowledge and skills required to effectively manage the mathematical demands of diverse situations, and problem solving refers to goal-directed thinking and action in situations for which no routine solutions exist. The high number of adult New Brunswickers who do not have prose literacy, document literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving knowledge and skills necessary to function in a modern industrialized economy and society raises questions and issues that need to be addressed in relation to a possible growing shale oil and gas industry in New Brunswick. Quote, literacy is linked to control over one's life. This is sometimes called empowerment, end of quote. New Brunswickers' ability within the various domains of literacy is key in their understanding and acting upon information about shale, oil and gas and associated risks, opportunities, health and environmental concerns, regulations, etc. Based on the IALSS survey, 56% of New Brunswick's population aged 16 and over who scored at the lowest two levels in the prose domain, 58.3% who scored in the lowest two levels in the document domain, and 65.3% of New Brunswick's population aged 16 and over who scored at the lowest two levels in the numeracy domain are not able to understand and act upon information found not only within the Government of New Brunswick's Natural Gas from Shale website, but also upon information found within the New Brunswick Natural Gas Group's recent discussion papers, Responsible Environmental Management of Oil and Gas Activities in New Brunswick, Recommendations for Public Discussion, Executive Summary of Recommendations, Sharing of Royalty Revenues from Natural Gas Activities in New Brunswick, List of References and Case Studies and Lessons Learned. The information and understanding needs of New Brunswickers who scored in IALSS levels 1 and 2 in the prose, document, numeracy, and problem-solving domains are not being met by government's efforts both to be transparent and to engage the public with respect to shale oil and gas.
What percentage of the population?
What regulatory, I'll read very quickly. What regulatory measures will government introduce to ensure that it not only reaches out to that percentage of the population that has a higher than level 3 literacy score in these domains, but that its efforts to be transparent and to engage the public with respect to shale oil and gas also include all New Brunswickers on the literacy skill continuum as public stakeholders in the shale gas discussion? Literacy is a critical determinant of employability, with 56% of it, and the same statistics, okay? So these are people who are not able to reach, they're at risk of not being able to fully reach their social and economic potential. So New Brunswickers are being told of the prospect of job opportunities if an expanded shale oil and gas industry takes off in the province. Progressive and sound fundamental social and economic policies for development and jobs in New Brunswick do not only promote employment opportunities related to shale oil and gas industry that will employ New Brunswickers throughout the literacy skill continuum. It should focus primarily on raising the level of literacy skills for that 50% of the population of New Brunswick between the ages of 16 and 65 who have less than IALSS level 3 skills, who will remain at risk of not being able to fully reach their social and economic potential working in shale oil and gas related jobs that may not require prior qualifications.
30 seconds.
Okay, it's also literacy is a critical determinant of a safe workplace environment, and I have some discussion on that. It's also a key social determinant of health. I have discussion on that. It's also linked to control over one's life, and that also involves signing land leases, negotiating mortgages, royalty agreements, what have you, whatever it is. And literacy is also critical in a democratic political process such as elections and referenda. Considering that 50% of the population between the ages of 16 and 65 have less than the level of literacy deemed necessary to function in a modern industrialized economy and society, what regulatory measures will the government introduce to ensure that the information and understanding needs of the 50% of the population of New Brunswick between the ages of 16 and 65 who have less than the level of literacy deemed necessary to function in a modern industrialized economy and society will be fairly met should the government decide to proceed with a referendum question on shale gas? Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to have to put a time limit, but there's so many people that need to speak, and we'd like your reports. We've had that comment before in other meetings, and it's been taken under advisement because it's an extremely technical report, and we understand that, and we appreciate very much your interventions. It's a very, very complicated field, and we've tried to make it as readable as possible, I assure you. Yes, please.
I'm Ann McAllister, and I'm from Rothsay, and I'm just a citizen, but I'm part of the NB Water First group. And I'm going to ask for my first question, a question that was asked earlier, but I don't think an answer was given to that. And that is, why was there no meeting like this held in either Rothsay, Quispamsis, or St. John?
And I can assure you that we've heard the location issue on many occasions, and we've taken it back to government. Is all I can tell you on that particular issue.
Yeah, that's too bad that I can't get more of an answer, just because I see, when I came here with the expectation I would be speaking to representatives of the government that would be able to speak for the government.
And I can assure you that Dr. Leclerc's report is going to government, and everything that has been noted will be noted in his report to government.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is, there was a comment earlier about wastewater treatment and how it's being treated now. In other words, it's being trucked to Debert, and then from Debert treatment facility being dumped into the Bay of Fundy. How is it being treated exactly?
Technical question. Does somebody on the panel want to?
Well, it's going to Debert, as you said. It's also, I think there's some of it going to, I believe there might be some of it going to a facility in Quebec, but I'm not exactly certain. In terms of that, all we can say that it is a licensed and approved facility to handle that waste under the government of Nova Scotia. So in terms of the exact details of the treatment process, I'm not privy to that information. So, yeah. I'm not sure, dumping in the Bay of Fundy doesn't ring a bell with me, but
we can get you information again. If you want to leave us your name afterwards, we can get you in contact with the actual corporation that does it.
That would be great, because I think that the present situation doesn't inspire much confidence in me for future responsible treatment of wastewater. And my third question is, why couldn't the government take legal action against Windsor Energy for its testing violations inside Sussex town limits?
I can answer that very briefly, is that the government decided to pass information to the RCMP, and for reasons the RCMP would be best able to explain, they didn't let me say. However, part of the discussion paper today includes administrative penalties, which weren't there before.
And can we get any information on that currently, on what state that legal action or prosecution or whatever is in?
In relation to the RCMP in Windsor?
Yeah.
It was dropped.
It's null and void. The RCMP decided not to pursue with charges.
Why?
The RCMP makes the decision of going to the Crown or not, and I'm not in a position to answer a legal question.
Yeah. I think that is sounds to me like a loophole that perhaps needs to be plugged in future.
And we'll certainly make note of that as well.
And my final question is, what exactly is wellbore integrity, and how can it be guaranteed?
Sure. Does somebody want to speak? The question is, we're getting some cleanup here. The question is, what is wellbore integrity and how do you guarantee its integrity? So this is Craig Parks, who's a petroleum geologist.
Sure. Wellbore integrity just speaks to the actual ensuring that the gases and oils or fluids, methane, that are contained within the wellbore and do not leak from that wellbore other than any way that it was intended to, be it pipe or into the mud tanks that are on the drill rig itself. It's a series of steel casings that are used to ensure that with cement layers that are in the annular spaces between those steel casings, and they have to be done, certainly have to do it properly with the proper cement mix and proper casing ratings, but then they have to be evaluated after that to ensure. And there's various ways that they're evaluated. There's pressure testing that's done after the installation in a certain wait time, typically 8 hours to wait on cement to let it cure and ensure that it has cured, to a 3,500 kPa, bench test pressure. So basically, it can handle that type of pressure. Also, there's different types of logs. Cement bond logs would be one example, but basically there are types of logs that can be run, there are other ones, that can be run in the wellbore to actually examine what the casing sheath, or the cement sheath actually looks like on the outside of the casing. And what you're looking for there is basically to ensure that you do have a good cement seal, particularly on the surface casing string, as it's certainly the most important. Downhole, there's other strings of casing that are important as well, but certainly the surface casing string, that is there to protect groundwater aquifers, near surface aquifers, so that's critical. Is that?
Yes, thank you. How long does it last?
How long does it last? Well, in cases where the wells have been in production, then they have to be reevaluated at certain intervals, given a number of years, to ensure that that casing is still adequate. There are another type of logs that are actually called casing corrosion logs, that they actually look at the actual steel integrity to ensure that's there as well. So there's continuous monitoring on that. Also at the wellhead, we put in recommendations for safe surface casing vents, and that way you can actually monitor the pressures at the wellhead to ensure that you don't have any leaks going on as well. So,
how long?
How long they last?
Yes.
Depend on the well.
A well can last for 20, 30 years.
Well, during a production, it really depends on the well. Once the well is ceased production, it would be at that time then the well is properly decommissioned, which is a series of bridge plugs and cement plugs that are put in the well, and they last. Steel and cement in anoxic environments last centuries, thousands of years. I don't know for sure what the exact time frame is.
Will they have to be maintained and monitored in perpetuity?
They're cut off below surface, about a meter and a half below.
Please, I've asked for quiet now.
They're cut off about a meter and a half below surface, and then a cap is welded on top of it, but the new standards call for that cap not to be welded tight, because if there ever was a problem, you have to know that that problem is there. That's why you can put monitoring in place. It's certainly some of the recommendations that we're also looking at, but the old standards, where it's actually welded airtight cap, like a steel plate on top of that, following abandonment, decommissioning of the well, but the new standards leave that so it actually has a pressure trip valve that will not allow the buildup of pressure underneath the ground, because it could be an explosion hazard. That's basically why the new standards are coming out, which are addressing that.
Who pays for this?
Industry.
In perpetuity?
Well, when the well comes in, before a company can drill a well, they post what's called a well abandonment security with us, and we've addressed that in a document as well. We have our current well abandonment security, we don't feel was adequate for the drilling of these new wells, and basically the amount of cost it takes to properly decommission these wells. So what we've done is we've made recommendations to the government to put into place new well abandonment securities that would reflect the actual cost, the real cost of having to do the work if the company were to not properly do it or leave the province.
For how long?
For how long it'd be, if the well is properly abandoned, and we have the supporting documentation and have reviewed that well, then that money would be returned to them within a year after it's been properly done. It's held until it's done properly. Within a year? And my colleagues here also reminded me that we are also in the document talking about an orphan well fund to put into place. It would be typical, I think, to have other jurisdictions that are doing this, and it's a surcharge type system that would be placed on industry during well permits, where they would actually have to post money to the government, which would go into what we're calling an orphan well fund, that would be collected over time to deal with any legacy.
Folks, I really ask you to come to order, please.
Okay, but you still haven't told me how long this process is going to continue.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is how long will the funds be available to repair the well?
And how long will the well require monitoring?
Well, the well is going to be required to monitor on a regular basis, probably for the foreseeable future, in my mind. But I just want to mention about the orphan well fund is in fact money that's collected if the well company abandoned their well properly and went away, and then they gave the land back, say it was Crown land, or they gave it back to the landowner, the lease has expired. We consider at that point the well is called an orphan well. It means no one owns the well. The fact is that in other jurisdictions, such as Alberta, they collect money in advance in the anticipation that some of those wells in the future may require some remediation for leakage. So that money is available because they can't go after the company. It's available in perpetuity because it's been collected up front. And that's what our recommendation is. So that's in addition to the well abandonment security, which is a separate.
And has that money been collected from the company?
It has not yet, no. It's
No.
a recommendation we've made in the event that the shale gas industry proceeds in Brunswick.
Okay, we're gonna try to move things along, and I didn't take any of your time. You're still on your time. So
Okay.
you got 2 minutes.
Oh, I've got 2 minutes, okay. You mentioned that they don't have an airtight cap on the wells now because they don't want to have pressure built up which would risk explosion. So therefore, and you said that cap that they have now has a vent on it which allows the pressure to be reduced, and that would mean that gas has to be leaking out. What gas is leaking out?
Before that cap has to be put on, the well has to be sitting there static.
Can't hear you.
Oh, pardon, sorry. Before that cap is welded on, the well has to be static, and they have to have pressure testing equipment on site to ensure that the well is in fact dead. If there was a leakage of gas in that well after the fact, it would be methane gas that would be coming up from the formation. But that's why the well has to be pressure tested for a period of time to ensure that in fact that well is static.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, sir, with the black shirt.
Okay, my name's Jerry.
You're gonna get a little closer to the mic, please?
Hello. I don't know if it's on.
The second mic? Hang on, my sound guy is on it. Go ahead now.
Hello. Happy? My name's Jerry Howe. I'm just a concerned citizen from Lower Millstream. This should be pretty brief. Angie Leonard is the Senior Natural Gas Advisor with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. And she was quoted in the July 3rd, 2012 edition of the Telegraph as saying, "This industry has been safely developing gas in Western Canada for decades, and we have had no groundwater contamination during that time." And I would guess that Jessica Ernst would probably take exception to that. And there are a lot of residents in northern BC who might not speak of groundwater pollution as much as about airborne pollution, which is prevalent in the heavily developed areas up there. In 2003, Schlumberger, and I'm sure you guys have heard of the Schlumberger group of companies, reported that industry data indicated that while roughly 6% of all wells leak within the first year of construction, by the time the well is 15 years old, there is a 50% probability that there will be annular leakage in constructed wells, resulting in the communication between what are supposed to be physically isolated zones, such as the pay zones, gas zones, and, for instance, the aquifer. That's 2003 data. In 2011, Archer Well Services stated that according to more current industry data, that approximately 38% of 760,000 wells that have been constructed globally are leaking. And that's just shy of 290,000 wells leaking. Now, Angie Leonard, Senior Natural Gas Advisor with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, says this is safe development. Right? Not news to you guys, is it? Right. So, and that industry, and I quote her, industry standards allow shale gas development to forge ahead without the report's findings. And when she says the report, it's a report on human health risk assessment, which is ongoing in BC right now. That's the industry's position. That's their track record, right here.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Oh, no, you're not. I would like to talk about the EIA that you guys mentioned earlier and how stringent that is. The operation that is, well, has been undertaken up in the Elgin area on the Green Road. You're familiar with that? Sure. Do you know who did the EIA? Anybody? Anyone? No? Sorry. Not surprised?
Sorry, who did the EIA?
Who did the EIA, yes. Who conducted it?
In Elgin?
Who conducted it?
I don't know. Pierre, do you know the exact, I'll tell you, in general terms, if that's good enough for you.
No, that's not good enough. It shouldn't be good enough for you. I'll tell you who did it. The same people that are conducting the operation, Corridor Resources. And we have the document to prove it. The document that was forwarded from Corridor to the province. And don't act surprised, folks, because, you know, according to people that we spoke with at the CBC and other places, this is common knowledge.
Sure.
Common knowledge to you folks?
Environmental impact assessments are carried out by a technical review committee.
I have the document. You're not telling me anything.
Okay, I won't tell you anything, but I just want to say a sentence or two about the way the EIA works. Generally what happens is the proponent, in that case it would be, who was the proponent? Corridor? Corridor. Yeah, Corridor was the proponent. And they're required to submit a document, which is called a registration document, to government for review.
It was called an EIA.
Yeah, it's called an EIA. Yeah. They call it registration. Sometimes they call the EIA document, whatever.
Yeah.
They put different names to it. Typically, a company will be responsible for preparing it. They would supply the information, but they're not responsible for reviewing it. That's reviewed by a technical review committee, which is...
Well, I'll tell you what, I reviewed it. I didn't think much of it, and I don't know anything about your industry. I just know that it was full of holes. Full of holes, and any idiot could figure that out.
Just go ahead, please.
Yeah, and with respect to the processed water that was hauled to Divert, when that was hauled, am I right or wrong, there was no requirement for the gascos to disclose the fracking chemicals, the constituent chemicals in the fracking fluids, is that correct? So how could they engineer a process to treat that effluent?
Frac fluid disclosure has been a requirement in the province since about last June 2011.
Do you know when they started dumping that effluent in Divert?
Probably preceded
A hell of a
that.
lot?
Yeah, it was earlier than that.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
answer my question.
Is it
What was your
not
question?
voluntary?
My question was, how could they design a process to treat that if they didn't know what the constituent chemicals are?
Are
And
you
how can they
saying-
say that it was treated adequately and then dumped in the river in Divert, which is where it wound up?
I would say that if I were Divert and I were the waste facility, I would want to know what's in that chemical, it's wastewater.
So you guys accept no responsibility, or the government accepts no responsibility for that effluent once it leaves the wellhead?
Once it leaves the province.
Once it leaves the wellhead?
No.
Oh, so you just dump it in Nova Scotia, that's an ideal.
So you got 1 minute. You have 1 minute left.
I have 1 minute left. Time flies. Well, I guess I'd like to talk about the dumping of sludge and the removal of barriers that has happened here just outside of town. And like, what do you guys know about that? And are you in touch with that? Do you know that it was within 2 kilometers of the municipal water supply for Sussex Corner? Do you know about that? No? Didn't think so. And I'll tell you, like, this stuff's all gonna come to surface, boys. We're gonna get soil samples. You can bury that all you want to try, but that pollution is there, and it's been witnessed.
Sure, go ahead.
Dr. Lapierre? Dr. Lapierre? Dr. Lapierre, can you hear me? Is there a problem? Dr. Lapierre? Panel? Dr. Lapierre? Panel? My name is Neil McLean. I'm a retired professional engineer who's worked in the electronics industry, the utility business, and in the nuclear industry, as well as in consulting. I'm retired. I have degrees from UNB, Sussex, and Cornell. And I don't oppose new technology on principle. I came to shale gas with an open mind, but after quite a bit of digging into it, I'd far rather live next to a nuclear power plant than an area undergoing shale gas development. I'm greatly alarmed that the shale gas industry greenhouse gas emissions are at least as bad or worse than the coal industry when the total of all consequent emissions are considered, including those arising from stray emissions. To me, climate change is the world's #1 problem. I don't want New Brunswick to exacerbate this problem by engaging in shale gas development, which will cause abundant ongoing stray emissions of greenhouse gases, much worse than carbon dioxide. And stopping such emissions, once started, presents much difficulty because of unidentified leakage paths. And there's already been discussion here this evening about how a lot of this leakage arises. My second greatest concern with shale gas development is the threat to water supplies, both long-term and short-term. I was previously at a presentation on fracking put on by the government's shale gas group before the St. John branch of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geologists. At that presentation, I raised concerns about the potential for frac fluid migration through ground faults. One of the people who answered me was Annie Daig, who's here today. She reassured me there could be no problem and stunned me by quoting Dr. Tonia Ingraffia of Cornell as backing up her assurance. I subsequently spoke directly to Dr. Ingraffia, one of the world's foremost experts on fracking, and checked this out. Dr. Ingraffia shared my concerns and could not recall saying anything which would suggest that frac fluid migration through ground faults could not occur. Common sense tells you that when you have a fluid under a huge pressure over 10 megapascals, it will seek the path of least resistance, and a fault that is not tightly sealed offers such a path, which can facilitate many kilometers of fluid migration driven by the extremely high source pressures used in fracking. One huge problem with fracking is the unreliability of cement casings, and we've already heard observations on that and the fact that the figure of 6% was quoted as the initial failure rate on these casings, and it only gets worse over time. So I read with some amusement the government's recommendation about fixing broken cement casings, and I took that to be something of a hopeful fairy tale. with respect to any breaks at any depth. I suggest you refer to Dr. Engagrament's lecture, which he gave in Hampton not long ago. All you have to do is Google Engagrament Hampton, and the two parts of his lecture show up on the screen, and you can click on them. It explains why the problem of cement casing integrity is essentially intractable. They've been working on it for decades, and they'll be working on it for decades to come. Yes, there are improvements that are made, but it is going to continue to be a problem. When an objective, qualified source of expertise suggests that the problem of well casing integrity is essentially intractable, I believe him. He's paid to be accurate, not to try to promote the dreams of the Premier of New Brunswick. Every well that is drilled is its own potential pathway to aquifer contamination because of the unreliability of well casing cement. I consulted a retired geoscientist about my concerns. This gentleman does some consulting on the side and most recently was hired by the large North American engineering consulting firm EXP to assess aquifer vulnerability within the Royal Planning Commission area in which Norton is located. There are abundant potential naturally occurring pathways in the ground. Southern New Brunswick has been the point of collision between continents in the geological past, and this diagram from the Canadian Journal of Earth Sciences shows the major faults in the so-called Moncton Basin, which takes in Sussex and the Kennebecasis Valley. A series of major faults run in parallel, and they haven't been thoroughly investigated, but they're believed to run in varying depths over 30 kilometers deep in places. And there are a much larger number of smaller lateral faults off the major faults, and indeed sublaterals. Because of the way the major faults were formed, they tend to be in compression and in many cases would obstruct fluid flow. But the laterals and sublaterals are much less apt to be in compression and therefore offer abundant, potentially good fluid flow paths.
Mr. McLean, you have about a minute and a half. I'm sorry
Okay.
about that, there's 12 people behind.
Okay.
We certainly hope you'll give us your documentation.
Okay. So what this means is that when we lay out many thousands of kilometers of underground laterally drilled fracking lines intended only to permeate neighboring shale, you are bound to intersect small unexpected faults which have the potential to allow the injected fracking fluid to migrate much further than intended. A rough calculation shows that a pressure of 8 MPa is sufficient to pump water up to in a column up to about half a mile high, near a kilometer. But regardless of pumping pressures, underground conditions can see fluids more gradually migrate upwards over time, driven by forces derived from differentials in density. That seems to me to make vast quantities of frac fluid left in the ground rather a serious potential risk over time and hardly practical to clean up. So it seems to me to be common sense to be less than fully assured that pumping vast tonnages of toxins into the ground is advisable in view of the threat it poses to our aquifers. If you think about the care that is normally exercised in the construction of a sanitary landfill, it is sited on relatively impermeable ground to start with, and then there are multiple layers of containment membrane with leakage detection between the layers. A similar approach is taken in nuclear storage. If there's a leak, you go and fix the problem before the last layer of protection is violated. If you contrast this with fracking, the whole thing is designed specifically to leak everywhere. From my point of view, we don't have a more important resource than fresh water. It makes no sense to me to be putting that at risk for a short-term industry demonstrated to be anything but straightforward, that will make a mess of our roads, make a mess of the countryside, pollute our air, threaten our health, threaten other industries that rely on a good environment, and accelerate climate change. If we think administrative regulations alone can make inherently unacceptable risks okay, then instead of inviting the shale gas industry into New Brunswick, I think we should do our safety by regulation magic for the outer space industry. It offers better jobs, more is known about outer space than underground New Brunswick, and any big screw-up will land in somebody else's water.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Yes, I'm going to go right to the speakers as much as possible now because it is... Yeah, go ahead, please.
My name is Stephen Antonson. I drove down from Resegornish today. This was the only meeting that met my schedule, and I'll tell everybody what I do and hope to make it out of here alive. I'm an oil field engineer, and I work in Southeast Asia. And I don't argue that there's incredible risks that come with fracking. And there's risks that come with oil field all across the board. It's not just fracking. I work on the other side of the world. I fly 100,000 miles a year to raise my family. I've got 3 kids in New Brunswick, and all I want for them is a good future. And I'm not saying you should buy into fracking. All I'm asking you is give my kids a chance to have a job in this province so they don't have to do what I do. Because I spend 6 months a year away from my family. All right, and I'm not saying you should do fracking, just give them a chance to see what's down there. And I want to ask the panel, what's the relationship between seismic exploration and hydraulic fracking? If we let these people do seismic exploration, does that mean we have to let them do hydraulic fracking?
They're already doing it.
I'm asking the panel, can somebody on the panel tell me, if we let these companies do seismic exploration, do we have to let them do hydraulic fracking? What's the relationship between seismic and fracking?
Yeah, I heard you, yeah. I can answer that in terms of the permitting process, first of all. The exploration, it's a permit, it's a license to search. That's all it grants. For example, Swin has a license to search over the, gone now, but there was a map showing the area.
How much of the province have we searched?
How much have they searched?
How much have they searched?
They haven't finished searching their own leaseholdings. And what percentage of the province is that?
Give us a ballpark.
I think it's like 1 million hectares or something that they have the ability to search. But the point I'm trying to make is...
We haven't searched very much.
No, we haven't searched very much.
So we don't know what's down there.
We have no idea.
So do we know if we can even drill it?
No.
So do we know if we're going to do fracking?
No.
So we've spent an hour talking about something we don't even know if we're going to do. Is that right? Have we spent an hour talking about something we don't know if we're going to do? Everybody's worried about fracking. You don't even know if you can frack it yet. What are you worried about? So you don't want them to explore?
No, we don't.
All you have to do is talk to your politicians about what's important. These people here. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. They don't listen, but these people do, and you're angry at them. All right? The oil field is a dangerous place to work no matter where you put it or what you do with it. It's not hydraulic fracking that's dangerous. It's everything from the start to the finish. It's shipping pipe, raising derricks, moving equipment, standing on a rig floor. It's all dangerous. But where do we get it from? Where does our oil come from now? Saudi Arabia. And how do they treat people in Saudi Arabia? They got a union? That's right. They put nails in their hands so they don't act up. Where does the money come from in this province? It comes from Alberta. Do they frack in Alberta? We're not all right with fracking. Why are we getting money from people that do frack?
So you want your kids to work in a dangerous place in New Brunswick instead of a dangerous
No,
place?
I don't. If you're not for fracking, don't take the money for it. And I don't want oil from a country that sticks nails in people's hands.
Oh, God.
Okay, order in the house.
All right, so anyways, now that I've got that off my chest, I don't agree with cancer. All right, I don't want my children to die for oil, but I want them to have a job, and I'd like to have them a job, in Brunswick because I love this product. I wouldn't risk my groundwater in my backyard for oil and gas, and I wouldn't risk your groundwater here for oil and gas. But I think we should let them look for it with seismic. And I think you guys up there have the toughest job in the world to do, because what you're looking at is a marketing job. You've got to sell people on what's being done here, and people are missing it. And I really believe in The lady that got up and talked about the reading level. That's your biggest challenge here. You've got people coming up here with university degrees, and you got people that read at a grade 5 level, and you need to attack both of them. Because the information is complicated for people that are educated. It's very complicated for people that aren't. You have an obligation to all of those people. So you need to dumb down the message and include more statistics. Because as far as everybody in here is concerned, hydraulic fracking has never worked. And we know that's not true. So start bringing us the statistics of where this has worked. Start bringing us the statistics of where property values have gone up. Start bringing us success stories. Because everybody in here is going to bring you every failure that's ever happened. And you're going to have to counter it with every success that's ever happened. Because people in Alberta are not complaining about the money in their bank.
No, but they can't work.
So we need to know why it works. How many wells have been fracked globally?
How many gag orders?
How many wells have been fracked? Do we know? What percentage of those have created an issue? Do we know? What's our success rate that we're dealing with? We also need to talk about advancements in technology. All right, 10 years ago, fracking wasn't possible. Now we're talking about these risks are lifetime. This industry changes on a daily basis. I know I'm in it. And I'm in a service in the industry that changes on a daily basis. Technology is changing. I'm not saying that they should start fracking today. What I'm saying is we need to do a better job of educating the people out here. We need to know success stories, and we need to add it at grade 5 level and a PhD level both. You need it at both levels. We need success at grade 5 and PhD. And I appreciate the job you're all doing. And you'd probably get a lot less flack if you brought some air conditioners.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Okay, Dr. LaPierre and members of the oil and shale gas group. My name is Carl Wolpen. I have various degrees. The degrees that are relevant here or I have a master's degree in forest ecology and a degree in anthropology as well. I've worked as an educator, environmental consultant, and so forth. I can't help but take a second and reflect on the last gentleman's comments. I spoke to one of your group before and just asked, by and by, I think I was probably giving him a hard time. But I asked how many people were involved and for how long a time have they been involved in exploring shale gas possibilities. And these aren't full-time, some of them are consultants, but generally it was 12 to 14 months and about 50 people. I can't help but think, we are paying you to do this, we're paying government to do this. What has been not done because all our beads are in so-called one basket? For instance, my wife spoke before in terms of the potential development of the Kennebecasis Valley in terms of food growth. Our son employs 70 people, produce packs. These are going to be year-round jobs. That's a $30,000 check coming in every 2 weeks. He has a pay period of $30,000. He is licensed. This is an industry that will be gone. Our climate is changing and it's terrible, but here there are some benign things. We're getting a longer growing season. We have weather events, but we have 2 more months. He's going to be producing food to December. As Southern Ontario has difficulties and New England has difficulties, we could again become a food exporting area. If everything isn't put in one basket, if we still have our water, our air, and our soil, and can even sell organics if this goes. This is the future for our kids. He has beautiful young people working for him each summer. 3 summers, it's gone from 10 produce packs to 450 produce packs. He is feeding into St. John, Quispamsis, Rothesay, Sussex, and Hampton. Every week for 20 weeks, 22 weeks a year, people are picking up fresh produce that is delivered, picked the same morning. He has an insatiable demand, from 10 to 450 in 3 years. He figures he can feed Hampton if he has to, but there could be 9 other industries like that in this valley if you allow it. Now that's not what I came to talk about. I'm sorry about time, but we will go. I did take a tour of Penobscot a while ago, and I saw to my surprise, gas wells, and they were on a floodplain. And I said, man, that doesn't compute, because I was familiar with the Clean Water Act. I was familiar with the Wetland Act. I was familiar with the Environment Act, and I knew about EIA processes. How could 17 wells be built on a floodplain? And it kept secret from us. Nobody talks about it. This is the first time it's come up. Most of the people in this room don't even know that there's 17 wells. A lovely lady came up before and she says, well, I live on the Kennebecasis and I don't want it polluted in the future. I got news for you. There's 2 feet of water going over this floodplain once and sometimes twice a year. Anecdotally, I have no proof, but the people in the area said that snow does not stay at the top of the wells, and there is bubbling. I have asked Bruce Northrop at least 3 or 4 times about monitoring. Are these wells monitored? Will you monitor them? Is there leakage going on? How were they ever built on a floodplain? I have gotten a response. The Liberals did it. That was not under the Liberals, not I. No comment. We will look into it. I even wrote him, no response. Okay? Well, there are 17 wells that are probably leaking into the Kennebecasis. That's not brain science. Even if they were licensed, okay, even if the lease with the company, with Corridor Resources said, oh, we're not allowed to monitor it, government can't get in to monitor it, the Department of Environment can be ordered to monitor the river, the Kennebecasis River, below these 17 wells, and see if there's methane getting into the river. There's been dead fish coming up all summer. Oh, do we have to wait for a fish kill to get the Department of Environment to monitor it? Well, I called the Department of Environment. Can I talk to the people in charge of EIAs? Okay? Can you tell me how this possibly happened? Well, part of it is no big project, really, in reality. And I asked that to, I can't think of his name now, he's a Dutch guy, works for the Department of Environment. Anyhow, you know who he is, Van der Laan. I asked, how many of these big projects are actually rejected?